The Dressrosa Arc is a mixed bag, in no small part due to the varying quality of its large cast. You have such wasted potential as Rebecca and some of the Colosseum fighters, along with quite a few of the Don Quixote family being bland gimmicks, but also have lore presenting far more depth than simply being superficially cool or anarchic. Or Doflamingo establishing himself as a contender for best villain in the series, or at bare minimum top 3. Though Doflamingo is of course the arc's biggest success in character writing, I'd like to focus on what I'd consider its silver medal in Admiral Fujitora. The most notable part of Fujitora's character at first glance is his personal morality of humane justice, which can also be seen as blind justice. Believe in justice and standards should be upheld regardless of someone's affiliation, in a manner fairly close to Aokichi's lazy justice, and directly opposing Akainu's absolute justice. This appears in the highly destructive nature of his devil fruit in battle during the Green Bit conflict in particular, through him making Doflamingo every bit as much a target as Law. This conflict with Doflamingo leads into his goals of destroying the Shichibukai system, making his utilization of his personal justice far more proactive than the other admirals. Though Sakazuki has made many efficient changes to the Marines, he still tolerates the Shichibukai's role despite his belief of pirates being evil by nature. Issho does what he can to highlight the issues of the system, and the world government turning a blind eye to these privateers abusing their status, while still working within the limits his affiliation to the Marines places on him. These limits add to Fujitora's internal conflict throughout the arc, through his words and actions. It is made clear he'd defeat Doflamingo if he could, but does not want to rebel against the conduct of the Marines, acknowledging the necessity of this organization in protecting a world filled with enough darkness that Issho chose to make sure his eye saw no more of it. This is not only a good way of limiting a powerful character's utilization in the plot through their characterization and conflicting duties, but a display of the genuine faith in the Marines as a peacekeeping organization when he never goes out of line to pursue personal justice as Aokichi did. At the same time, he is far less complacent on going by the flaws of the system that increase as the arc goes on, where his character grows from being a stern follower of the orders he's given to aid Doflamingo to questioning the world government's judgment more so than the misgivings Arabasta had provided. This is no coincidence when Dressrosa is clearly a parallel to Arabasta, though I'd say Arabasta was the more consistent and overall better arc. Dressrosa presents improvements to Oda's writing skills in some areas, such as greater complexity to Doflamingo's character than Crocodile's initial self, or the ties between the former and Viola having more complexities to them than Vivi and Crocodile's simple antagonistic stance. Likewise, Fujitora's arc is an improvement on the utilization of Smoker and Tashigi in Arabasta, who also acknowledged Luffy's efforts in saving the kingdom despite his pirate status, and became aware of the evil of a certain warlord. Whereas Smoker saw this as a reason to aspire for greater status within the Marines, an admiral like Fujitora was incapable of doing anything against a far more dire situation, and, as Smoker even admits, Fujitora is able to go even further in breaking the pretenses of the world government's flawlessness when apologizing to Riku. Combined with his later display at the Leveille, Fujitora's complexities deepen in him being a staunch supporter of the Marines while having great disdain for the current state of the world government, that served to show both the importance of the Marines and a lesson to the audience on law enforcement. Though the law and those who enforce it can always become corrupt, protective services such as the police or army will always be a necessity in protecting the society more than if they were absent, a path that would inevitably lead to chaos. It's surprising to see many assume the endgame of the series would be the dissolution of the world government and the Marines, When the existence of chaotic pirates such as Blackbeard make it clear that lawlessness would come from that, the more likely path is that Fujitora will become the next fleet admiral, and shift things to a far more fair judicial system. A little talked about example of Fujitora's internal conflict at Dressrosa is him not cutting through the birdcage with Busoshoku Haki, which, while possibly being a display of the sheer defensive capabilities of this technique, is not so likely with how aware we are now of the difference between Doflamingo and the Admirals, even if assuming Fujitora is a step or two behind the power of the pre-time skip trio, with it being more likely a display of him not wanting to be the saviour of Dressrosa as an extension of the world government's power, with how the physical and metaphorical cage over the kingdom was a result of the government's carelessness towards the Shichibukai, and honouring the efforts of a free living pirate on the other side of the law, liberating the kingdom from both a tyrant Shichibukai and an extension of the issues behind the Tenryubito's sense of superiority. It's in his fight against Luffy as the coda after the climax that Fujitora's role as a blind warrior takes an interesting route, even leaving aside the obvious influence that Oichi played in his characterization. The blind warrior trope of them having far greater clarity on a situation than others is nothing new in and outside of manga, but Luffy versus Fujitora presents its own unique nuances compared to similar archetypes within shonen. Another blind warrior in shonen manga is Shu from Hokuto no Ken, who shares some similarities to Fujitora. Both blinded themselves, fought the protagonist to test them, seek no sympathy for their disability, and gain a desire to see the person they see as a symbol of change for the age. Whereas Shu serves primarily as a supporting force for Kenshiro's further rise, Fujitora still serves as an opponent to the Straw Hats, who leaves their capture or escape to chance, and honours when Luffy's actions align with his own personal justice, with the chances of him still serving as a future opponent to someone such as Zoro still being fairly high. Fujitora was ultimately persuaded to not capture Luffy from their fight, displaying the blurred lines of morality in their institutions, with Luffy acknowledging Fujitora as a moral person, and the loyalty Luffy inspired towards the commoners and royalty of Dressrosa alike, unintentionally displaying what Fujitora desires to achieve in the well-being of the public, as well as becoming aware of how the use of his powers against Luffy will have made the Admiral, like the defeated Shichibukai, a force placing a dangerous power over the citizens of the kingdom. Finally, it's worth going over the symbolism of Issho's character, as his Fujitora epithet places a lot of cultural ties into his character. Fujitora's meaning is Wisteria Tiger, which is quite unique when the pre-time skip admirals had far more broader colours in their epithets, that make more astute viewers question why he simply wasn't given the title Murasaki Tora, or Purple Tiger. Though Oda has said this is just because Fujitora sounded cooler, there are some deeper ties. In the language of flowers in Japan specifically, the wisteria symbolises love, longevity and good luck, which have its ties in Issho's character. He has more compassion to civilians and opposing individuals such as Luffy than the other admirals, has the resilience to live through what events he blinded himself towards, with the optimism of what the Marines can achieve, and luck plays a heavy part in his ideology, and the consecutive dice rolls that had Luffy avoid his strength for so long being good for Fujitora, who didn't wish to fight him. The wisteria is also associated with Amida Buddha, who brings people to the western paradise on a purple cloud, which is inverted into this wisteria tiger bringing the celestial object to the mortal plane in an attempt to bring his foe to the afterlife through force. The tiger part of his epithet, like the other admirals, comes from the Momotaro story, but how the combination of tiger and bull associated with Oni stands in opposition to Momotaro's companions, thereby sets up Fujitora and Ryokugyu in opposition to the previous generation of admirals. We can see this with Issho's overt arguments with Sakazuki, or be more active in aiding the common people than the cog in the machine that is Kizaru. Aramaki's attitude may seem like a weak point in this symbolism, but he too opposes the last generation in the opposite area, being a Tenryubito supremacist, compared to Sakazuki having disdain for them, Kizaru only following the orders of those in charge instead of agreeing with them, and Aokiji have an outright disdain for what the higher-ups of the world government ordered at Ohara. The tiger also has wider ties into Eastern beliefs through its place in Chinese astrology that further tie Issho's opposition to the world government's attitude, as the tiger is an animal willing to oppose the far stronger dragon. All that said, Fujitora stands out amongst the Admirals as having the most reasonable brand of justice, having the most fleshed out arc and conflict between morals and duty, and one of the shining jewels of the Dressrosa Arc, from the exploration of a secondary character to one of the main ones. The next One Piece video on Whole Cake Island will focus on the straw hat that had the most importance to it.